So this time, what I want to do is I want to start using the materials that are already within the SketchUp library, but I want to change them a little bit. So I'm going to leave these guys here for the time being, and I'm going to make a new shape. So go ahead and start with a rectangle again, and I'm going to make it a group and give it some volume. So again, I'm going to push my B key so that I can bring up my materials, and I'm going to choose, let's go with brick and cladding again, because these are easy to see when it comes to tiling. So I'm going to choose this material here. I'm going to apply it to the whole thing, and here's what I get when I apply it. So what I can do now within this dialog box is I can edit this. But what I have to be very careful with, and this is very specific to Apple, is I have to edit starting with my home materials, because I don't want to edit within the actual material itself. I want to edit just this one that I'm using for this model. And where you find your editing dialog in a PC is under your materials, and then it's next to select, you can go to edit. So you've selected the home. Once you're in your home, let me go ahead and pull that up too. You've clicked on your home key and you've got all of your materials showing up here. Then you can go over to select the materials you want to edit, and you can start to edit it within that. Alright, so the way that's going to work here is I'm going to select this, I'm going to right click, and I'm going to go to edit. And with the options I have, right off the bat, I have the option to adjust the opacity. So I can control how opaque or translucent that is. If I bring this all the way down to 0, it's completely transparent where you can't see it at all. If I've got it all the way at 100, it's completely opaque. So in this case, it's brick. I'm going to leave it the way it is. The next choice I have is my actual size. So if I knew for a fact that this was a very specific size, I could control the way that this tiles, because every single texture, you'll notice, is a texture that's basically a tile that's repeating over and over and over again. You'll see the same elements repeated over and over again, especially if you see a big patch of it. So we'll get into that a little bit more when we bring in our own textures. But for now, just keep in mind that these are all textures that are tiling and repeating. It's basically a repeating pattern. So I can control how big that is. And this is showing me that this little square represents what's being tiled over and over again. So the actual width of one of these blocks is 1 foot, and the entire height of this thing is 6 inches. So from here to here is 6 inches. So what I can do is I can control that by changing this to 2 feet. And what that's going to do is that's just going to double the whole thing in size. So now I've essentially made the whole thing 2 feet bigger. I can do pretty much whatever I want here and control how big this thing tiles. If I wanted to split this so that I'm no longer maintaining my ratio, let me go back down to 1 foot. And notice every time I click from this box to this box, it changes what's happening here. So it's actually controlling this height is connected to this width. And the reason for that is because, as you can see right here to the right, they're linked. So if I uncheck that link button, they're now no longer connected. So if I change this to 6 inches, it's now going to crush that, and it's going to make it a little bit more square. Or if I change this to 2 feet, it's going to dramatically stretch it, and in this case it's going to obscure it a little bit. It's actually making it a little bit hard to see. So I'm going to go ahead and undo that by taking this back to 6 inches and this 1 foot. Click. If I want to, well, let's just leave it at that for now. So I'm going to go ahead and close that. And you can see that I've kind of brought it back to where it was, but that's just editing the shape of it. If I wanted to take my bricks here and take a little bit of the color out of them. So I'm going to select my brick, and I'm going to go to my edit again, And instead of dealing just with this, the size and the opacity, on a Mac I have the option to click over here to my color wheel, and this is where I can start actually affecting the color of this. So on a PC, whoops, let me bring the edit one up. On the PC, you'll notice that the color is all within this. So I'm actually dealing with the color, and I'm dealing with the opacity. I'm dealing with all that in one place. So you don't have to go as many places on a PC. So let me go back to my right-click, edit. So now I'm going to, in its simplest form, I can just drag the slider up and down to make this color lighter or darker. You'll notice that this isn't perfect because if I bring it all the way up, it becomes this kind of hyper color. So some of this kind of stuff, some of this kind of color editing you'll probably want to do in Photoshop at some point or any other imaging editing program. But at its bare bones, I can just make this lighter or darker here. I can also move this around anywhere on the color wheel and change the color of this uniformly. All right? This is my favorite. I like to go, instead of dealing with the color wheel, I like to start with the color wheel maybe just to kind of get me going to see what kind of value I like. But then I like to ultimately take it into my different sliders here. And on a Mac, I can go with my hue, saturation, brightness. I can go with RGB, my grayscale. I like to go with the hue, saturation, brightness because with hue, I can control the actual color on the spectrum it falls. So if I want it to be somewhere in the reds, I can drag it to, kind of a bricky red. With brightness, I can control how bright or how dark it is. And with saturation, I can control how saturated it is. And I like to, you can almost make it, well, you can purely make it black and white if you want to, or you can make it very, very, very chromatic. I like to go somewhere down into the more desaturated tones for some of these things, especially something like brick, and maybe bring it a little ruddier. So here's where I can control purely just the colors. And a nice thing is, what I have to always remember is once I'm done with my material, I have to hit close. And that's, I think, very specific to being on a Mac. And then if I go back to my bricks and cladding, I can see that my original brick and cladding is still there. So if I want to select my original brick, I can still put that next to it. And it's kind of hard to see because I didn't really edit this one enough. So maybe I should go back and just to make it clear, because this is the one we've edited. So I'm going to right-click and I'm going to edit this one. And I'll bring this into I'll make it kind of like weirdly green. So now I've got two options. When I have my bucket pulled up, I can also select my material by hitting my Command key, and that's going to give me the eyedropper. On a PC, you actually have the eyedropper, so you can just click on the eyedropper, and that's under Select. And what the eyedropper is going to do is the eyedropper is going to sample from whatever material you choose and automatically select. So if I am not within my palette and I'm not looking at what I've got, I can select by holding down on my Command key, or if I'm on a PC, by just selecting the eyedropper, and I can select the material it is that I want to choose, and I can click and just use that material over and over again. So these are kind of the real fundamentals of just getting started with editing some of the materials that you can edit within the program. So I would play around a little bit with that, get a little comfortable with just some basic in-model editing, and then we're going to move on to a little bit more advanced in-model editing in our next clip.